Hey guys, Kroot here. The ARC B570 is here. At basically 12% less performance across the board specs wise than the Intel ARC B580, while costing about 15% less than the B580. Is it the perfect budget gaming GPU for those users who need to make every single penny count, or is it poor value compared to the B580? Stick around as I put this card through its paces. I spent about 18 hours gaming on this GPU, so let me share with you actual gameplay footage and my opinion as an actual user, not just someone who's running benchmarks. Now, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel if you like the way I review GPUs. This is the first of many here at the relaunched Kroot Tech channel, so I am really excited to bring this review to you. Alright, so here's my test bench that I test on. It's a real world use case for the B570. It's a Ryzen 5600X with 16 gigs of RAM, 2400 megahertz, and you can see my other test bench I have. That's the 1440p monitor and the 1080p one. And there's the capture card that I use to get actual gameplay footage from the B570 so that we don't have any performance degradation. Alright, let's start off with Call of Duty at 1080p. Now, I want to first say I do not think this is a 1080p GPU, but I wanted to give you a baseline of how well it does at 1080p. Basically, you can expect with a little upscaling to get close to maxing out a 144 hertz monitor on esports games if you're willing to lower the settings enough. I use balanced performance and balanced upscaling on this one. But then again, people who are gaming at 1080p already have graphics cards that can do that, and this would feel like a side grade at best for more money in most of these situations. So I do not think it's worth it. And I also want to say that when reviewing GPUs, I use real in-game footage and then I talk about it so you can get an idea of the performance and you can hear my opinion while I'm playing on these settings. And you can see here that I have the VRAM shown, the average frame rate, and the 1% low frame rate so you can get an idea. Call of Duty plays pretty smooth, and like I said, this is what you're going to get out of it with 1080p at balanced everything. So about 110-ish to 120-ish FPS, give or take, just depending on what's going on. Alright, so I'm only showing the settings for Call of Duty because I played it in 1080p and 1440p, so I want to share that with you. One thing I do want to talk about in Call of Duty is I had some packet loss, which is really weird, and essentially when I Googled it online, it said I had to lower the VRAM usage to about 70%, which is weird because it doesn't actually come close to using the 10 gigs of VRAM on this card. But you will notice as we get to some of the other more higher end games, it is nice to have that extra 2 gigs of VRAM. So you can see this is Call of Duty in 1440p. Now I really believe that this is a budget 1440p GPU and you will need upscaling on this. And as you saw in the settings, we have XeSS on and we have balanced settings on this one. I played about 6 rounds of COD, all on hardcore, so you have to have pretty fast reaction time. Honestly, I didn't really have any issues, and it played pretty flawlessly. When you have a GPU of this price range, it's not going to be perfect, right? Like, it's not going to be like you're playing on a 4090, but it's a very solid experience nonetheless, especially for someone who wants to get into 1440p gaming. Playing on hardcore, so I need to have pretty fast reflexes, and I'm happy. Besides that issue I had with the VRAM, having to put it at 70%, no problems with this game. Pretty solid. I would also say that my player skill was much more of a limiting factor than the GPU, as I'm not very good at this game on my best days. So, like I said, we're about between 90 and 110-ish FPS, but you can see the 1% lows are pretty tight to the average, which means that we're not really getting any lag or anything. It is nice to have that 10 gigs because if this was an 8 gig card, we'd be pushing pretty close to the VRAM limit and basically couldn't do anything else on the computer. Alright, next we're going to do for Horizon Forbidden West. This one was nice. I had this one on basically all max settings with no upscaling on. I mean, you don't really have that many options in this game. And frankly, this game isn't that demanding. I mean, it's a beautiful game, but you can play it on a Steam Deck, as I've been spending a lot of time on it. But I'm getting an average of almost 60 FPS, especially during high action scenes, as you can see right here. And the 1% lows are within like 10 FPS, so you're really not getting any lag, which is nice. I just picked some random fight with some random machines right here to get some action sequences. But it's really nice that you can play, what I would call like an average single player experience. A newer game. I mean, this game came out, last year on the PC. So I would call it a AAA game and hit that 60 FPS mark at 1440p with upscaling off if you so choose. So it was a pretty seamless experience, and I was actually pretty impressed. I thought I'd get a lot less frames per second, but it held up pretty close to what I got on the B580. And again, I want to point to that VRAM. I'm not a big proponent of, the world's over. A lot of these graphics cards don't have enough VRAM, but 6 gigs and 8 gigs of VRAM is just not enough in this day and age. So it was really nice that Intel put 10 gigs on the ARC B570, and that's a theme you're going to see throughout my testing. Alright, let's get to Space Marine 2. Now, this had a little bit of controversy on the B580 due to its quote-unquote poor performance, which I did not agree with. So I wanted to test it on the B570, and I wanted to use a heavy action sequence or sequences, and we have upscaling on. Now, we're using FSR because it does not have XeSS. That stinks, but it's performing pretty well, you can see. Now, what's important to me is the seamless gaming experience over the FPS. We're getting about a 10% FPS difference from the averages to the 1% lows, so I did not experience any lag, which is the most important thing when you're playing a single player title, in my opinion. Now, I had all the settings to medium, so I didn't go crazy cranking them, but as you can see, this is a pretty beautiful game, and there is a lot going on. I tried to pick 2 different battle scenes where there was enough action to test the game, and you can see in this sequence coming up right here that we're about to get a ton of action, and I really don't feel like the FPS is a problem. Now, that is definitely going to be opinion based, which is why I have the numbers up here, but you can see even when we're getting under 50 FPS, the 1% lows are still really close to the average, which is one of the most important things to make sure that you have a seamless experience. Now, like I said, I didn't show any problems, or I didn't see any problems. I was also kind of busy looking at the eye candy because this engine is beautiful with how many models you can see on the field at once. But I honestly very much believe that the ARC B580 held up really well, even in 1440p gaming. Now, if I wasn't so bad at this game, maybe it would look cooler. I'm probably the reason that it doesn't look as cool because I keep getting knocked down. But in all seriousness, I think the ARC B580 performed marvelously. And again, having more VRAM obviously is really going to help in a title like this too. There's your Space Marine 2 results. And I move on to Cyberpunk 2077. So for this one, we did ray tracing at medium, and we did XeSS upscaling at balanced, and the rest of the game settings between medium and high. Crowd density is high because realism in Cyberpunk is important to me. Now, I wanted to crank the ray tracing up a little more, but it basically crushes this graphics card. So this is what you get. You get about 50-ish FPS, 45 to 50 FPS, and the lows are about 10 FPS difference. I played about 3 to 4 hours on Cyberpunk, and I tried to explore the city and go to as many high populated areas as I could. I really didn't have an issue. I think I might have lagged like one tiny bit when I did some crazy car stunts when there was a lot of stuff on the board. But like I said, I'm trying to push this game as hard as I can on this GPU. If you were to say lower the ray tracing or maybe turn down crowd density or maybe tweak 1 or 2 settings, you could probably get that FPS higher. But to me, the reason you play Cyberpunk is for the realism, and it is a great stressor on the GPU. And you can also see we used a ton of VRAM, so we probably couldn't get we probably couldn't get it to look this good on any 8 gig VRAM card like the 4060 Ti. I'm looking at you. So again, another plus for Intel. We keep going back to that VRAM, but it's very important. So Cyberpunk looks great, plays great, and I had, like I said, maybe 1 or 2 tiny glitches, but it didn't ruin the immersion. And I was actually pretty impressed by how well the ray tracing cores worked on Cyberpunk. Alright, so the strongest, most powerful game that I wanted to test was Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I didn't really do too much in this test. I just kind of wanted to wander around and see how much I could push it. Now, when you're not running an NVIDIA card, you get less options to play with in the settings. I turned upscaling off. Everything else is medium to low, so I didn't really go that crazy with the visuals. And you can see the FPS that I'm getting. The game looks pretty solid, and it is pretty impressive that you can push a game this strong as Indiana Jones, which basically will cripple every single GPU out, and that will about to be released. So it was impressive. Now, maybe I should have played with upscaling on, but I wanted to see how much I could get away with it being off. So here you go, and for a GPU this cheap, it's pretty impressive. Now, it didn't look as good as the B580, which is weird to say, but it really didn't. I don't know why it didn't look as good, but maybe that's just my opinion more than anything. But, I mean, you can see the FPS. We're floating around the 60-ish FPS mark at medium to low settings. And I got into some combat just so you can see what's going on. So you really can't complain about that. So yeah, that's Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Basically the most demanding game that's out right now. And the B570, it is playable, and it hit that 60 FPS mark for all those people that consider that the minimum of playability. Alright, so let me talk to you about the drivers. Now, maybe this is unrealistic and unfair of me, but I was a little disappointed that I had to reinstall new drivers on this computer because it already had B580 drivers. I guess I just thought that since they released so close together, the drivers would be the same. Now, that is unfair of me to say because you have to do the same thing with AMD and NVIDIA, but I guess I just thought maybe Intel would be a little different in that regard. But they weren't, and that's okay. I re-downloaded the drivers. They took about 10 minutes to put on my computer. Nothing crazy. Drivers were heavier this time. It came with some software that you had to install. I didn't mess with the software at all because I just didn't care. But like I didn't have any driver issues with any of my games, and it worked just fine with MSI Afterburner, which I was worried that there could be an issue because the drivers are so new. But we had no problems. So overall, the Intel drivers, I didn't have any issues. So that's a plus, right? And as far as the driver overhead other reviewers are complaining about, I didn't really notice it, but I didn't look for it either. The Intel drivers, thumbs up for me. Let's talk about efficiency. B570, along with the B580, are not efficient GPUs. But I don't care. Hands down, full stop. When you want to get the most power for the least amount of money, it's going to cause you to have to just brute force these things to make them stronger. You can't have it all, guys. If you want to save money, you're going to get less efficient cards. And frankly, unless you have a power rate of like 75 cents kilowatt hour, you're never going to notice the power cost to run these things. I've done math on this multiple times, and I know how to calculate the exact amount of power a GPU or any PC part uses. So efficiency doesn't matter. Now, that said, the only way it could matter is if it generates too much heat, but this is a 1.5 slot 2-fan card. It's not going to generate that much heat, guys. So don't stress about it and just skip the efficiency part of this thing, and let's move on to other things that matter. I just wanted to spell that out just so I can say that I talked about it and acknowledge the fact that these are not efficient GPUs. All right, so how does the B570 stack up to its closest competitors, the RTX 4060 and the 7600? Well, you can check out those comparisons. They're all over the place. I unfortunately don't have a 7600 or a 4060, so I can't do those myself, but I can talk about what the most important thing is the price. Now, at $300, the 4060 is basically DOA compared to the B570. That $70 is a huge price difference, guys. At the low end, $70 could be the difference of a budget CPU. It could be your case. It could be your RAM and your cooler. It could be a motherboard. That is too much money. When you need to make every penny count, the 4060 just costs too much. So let's kill it. It's DOA. The B570 is definitely the better choice. Now, the 7600, it's very close, right? And there are some games, now I have not tested it, but I know there are some games where the 7600 is just better. But, you only have 8 gigs of VRAM. So you have to ask yourself what you care about at that point. And when the price is so close, I honestly think that the VRAM is more important to me because while maybe it's a little bit worse in some games because of the driver overhead issues, it's just the 7600 is going to be worse in other games, and it's going to be worse in a lot of future games coming out because the VRAM requirements are going up, and 8 gigs of VRAM just doesn't cut it anymore. So, in my opinion, B570 being, $20 cheaper, and $20 is $20, especially at this price point, the VRAM is what takes it in the lead. As you saw on a lot of those games that I tested, we were at or very close to 8 gigs of VRAM usage, which means that you can't do anything else on your computer when you're gaming. You can't have any processor on in the background or anything. So the B570 is the winner out of those three, in my opinion, for the reasons that I just stated. Alright guys, that's it for this one. So my final thought is, if you want to buy new and you don't want to buy used, most of the time when you're on a budget, you don't have many options. It's basically you have to go to the used market or you just have to save up more money. The B570 changes that. At $230, this is the intro to 1440p gaming GPU that you're waiting for. You don't have to sacrifice. You can get a brand new part. You don't have to worry about all the problems that come used. And you can play on 1440p gaming. As a budget gamer in 2025, there's not much more you can ask for. So the B570 is a 2 thumbs up Kroot buy for me if you're looking for a new budget 1440p gaming GPU in 2025. Now, that's not to say that Nvidia or AMD could come out with something in the future. That could always happen. But I think the B570 is going to win this generation. Now, as the price comes down and the supply goes up of the ARC B580 and we get closer to its $250 MSRP, I have to let you guys know that that could be a viable budget alternative in the next few months, because for a few more dollars you get a lot more VRAM and you get, I think, a superior performance. But overall, like I said, the B570 is an absolute Kroot buy and another major win for Intel. So that's it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like more GPU reviews like this. Krootman is out.